we are discussing today's top stories. We've got Nick Ferrari and Camilla Tominey. Morning, both
Morning,
of you.
both of you.
Thank you for joining us today. So, last night at 8 p.m, people were encouraged to stand on their doorsteps with phones, candles, torches to signify a beacon of remembrance during a national day of reflection. The London Eye, Tate Britain, Blackpool Tower, Belfast City Hall, Liverpool Town Hall and parliaments in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland were amongst the other landmarks lit in yellow to mark the occasion. This was, certainly for where I was, a sort of little bit more muted occasion here, almost a sort of personal reflection. Perhaps, you know, if you've lost someone, this was a very important moment for you to mark that occasion. I think a lot of us felt that, yes, we were a year in, and I'm very lucky I haven't lost anyone close to me, thank goodness. But we weren't out of it, we were still in it. And so we were looking back, but also we're still looking forward with a little bit of uncertainty, Nick.
I think that's right. And I think what we got used to last year was the celebration of the incredible men and women who were working with the NHS, and they were on the front line. And to do that, that's why we cheered and applauded and banged saucepan lids and whatever else we did. Yesterday was a totally different tone, set by the Duchess of Cambridge laying the flowers, set by the Prime Minister, set indeed by the media. And I'm delighted to say in my part of London, there were candles. It was also, I think, quite poignant as well because it was getting dark and there were these candles burning. And you've nailed it. Last year, it was celebration of what the NHS was trying to achieve. It was, of course, remembering the terrible burden that they had and lives lost. This was a pure reflection on what people have endured. And you will have people watching now who have lost loved ones, whose lives have been devastated forever. And I think that's what we were pausing to remember last night.
And Camilla, how did you feel yesterday?
Well, do you know what? My own reflection on it came an hour later, watching the Kate Garraway documentary Finding Derek on ITV, which my husband and I just watched sort of open-mouthed in amazement and inspired by her own positivity in the face of such adversity. And there was Kate saying, you know, she felt like one of the lucky ones because she hasn't lost Derek. But I think that gave everybody watching pause for thought about how horrific this whole period has been for those directly affected by this disease, those who are suffering now from long COVID, those who are facing still weeks and months in hospital because of what happened. We shouldn't forget them either. And that death toll, I think, is going to stay with the nation forever. It's a horrific number. 120,000 dying, but I think we have to look positively forward now, and we are all hoping, aren't we? Hope springs eternal, that this Easter will mark a turning point for us all in some semblance of returning to normality. But that memorial that the Prime Minister mentioned yesterday is completely fitting. We must have something permanent to remember what has been, frankly, a horrific 12 months for all concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Some, you know, bright moments here. Banksy painting depicting a young boy playing with a superhero nurse doll called Game Changer has raised more than £16 million for NHS-related charities after being sold at auction. I mean, it's an amazing Banksy painting, but that's a lot of money, Nick, for the NHS.
It's a fantastic amount of money and it's well received. Unfortunately, of course, the NHS costs in the region of about £2 billion a week to run, which is what is the great services it's provided. All money gratefully received. I think possibly, and that's great, I do think, and Camilla will be tuned into this as well, the government's got a bit of a thorny one coming up with this attempt to hold NHS pay down to 1%, which of course includes nurses' pay. They have said that will now be reviewed. On the one hand, you see the great sentiment, right, that is fantastic, that money goes to the NHS. On the other, you see the government, which sometimes has money for other enterprises, but possibly not for nurses and doctors. That's something I think they might find a little bit tricky. They might try and fight their way through that one, I would suggest.
Yeah, Camilla, I imagine you'd agree with that.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think there can be an analysis of how the NHS operates, and indeed institutions like Public Health England and others that may, along with the government, be found wanting when it comes to any future public inquiry. But I think what the public can rightly agree on is that the efforts of doctors and nurses on the front line have been superlative, and therefore that 1% did seem to be a bit of an insult, frankly. And I think if there's public clamour for they to be given more money, then they probably will be, because that's how the government is going to have to respond.
I mean, is there, Nick, you know, that feeling of let's dip our toe in the water here, let's offer 1%, let's see what the outrage is, and then let's review it and have a look and maybe think about a little bit more?
Look, from their side of it, we've got hundreds of billions of pounds in debt, and it does eventually have to be paid. And if you're looking at a chart of pounds, shillings and pence, I was going to say pounds and pence, and you've got to balance books, I understand it. But there is what works on paper, and there's what works in practice and how it sits with the public mood. On paper, it might make sense because they have, I have to say, NHS staff have had a series of pay awards. This is what the government would point to. So they felt it wasn't necessary to top it up by more than 1%. On paper, that looks fine. Start, as Camilla says, start putting that out in public, start speaking about it on LBC or read about it in the Daily Telegraph or talk about it on This Morning. It's a very different mood you get very quickly, and the government should be alive to that.
Camilla, let's talk about this story. Children may start getting the COVID vaccine as early as August under provisional government plans set to push for maximum immunity for the virus. Supporters of the plan see mass vaccination of children as a way to minimise the spread of infection, but critics note the relatively low-risk COVID poses to youngsters and still emerging safety data. I mean, yes, we know that children aren't necessarily affected by this, but they are affected if someone in their class gets it and the whole class gets taken out and their education is therefore affected. What do you think?
Well, precisely. And I think when it talks about children, it may well be focusing more on those in secondary school, the under 18s, than those in primary. My understanding is that AstraZeneca is being tested on a group of children from the age of 6 upwards. And they're awaiting that data to see both if there is efficacy and, of course, safety in giving a vaccine. I think parents will want that guarantee. Look, I'm a mum who's had 3 children. I've had them immunised all throughout their lives in accordance with all of the recommendations. And I wouldn't have a problem with giving them a vaccine, but I think parents would want reassurance that it's been properly tested, because so far as my understanding is concerned, these vaccines have only been tested on the over 18s, and I think more data needs to be forthcoming to inspire public confidence in such a rollout.
Well, Israel, which has the highest proportion of vaccinated citizens, is already giving jabs to 16 and 17-year-olds after deeming it safe, Nick.
Yes, oh, Camilla sounds like the Prime Minister. They were going by data, not dates, Camilla. What's happened to you? I think in reality, let's look at the numbers here, Phillip. Roughly speaking, and this comes from the Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisations, roughly 1 in 4 of the population is deemed a child, 17 and below, about 25%. If we are going to get to herd immunity, doing most of the 75% of the country is not going to get us there. So I'm with Camilla. Once it passes these trials, which I read is around June or July, which honestly is not that far away. Once it passes these trials, once it's safe, I would suggest, yes, there's a whole raft of vaccinations anyway that our children have. Put this one on the list just so that we can all move on to whatever our new world holds.
Camilla, let's talk about Prince Harry. He's got a new job.
Yes, he has. Chief Impact Officer of Better Up, a Silicon Valley, or should we call it Silicon Harry, boom, boom, startup in America. So he's going to be talking about mental health. And I think the company itself seems to be focused on this idea of having employees just feeling better about their lives and jobs and trying to get some sort of work-life balance back. But obviously it's newsworthy, this sense that Harry has finally landed a full-time role outside of the royal family. We don't quite know what the commercial arrangements are or indeed how he's being paid. Maybe he's got stock options in this startup that seems to have a huge amount of investment in it. And obviously it's now gone global because it's got this great publicity from his association. So a very interesting development on that side of the pond.
And Zara Tindall's given birth to a baby boy.
Oh, congratulations.
You had to, Lucas, my understanding, it's the name. There was something on Twitter about the baby being born at home, but I'm not sure whether that's true. But she's got 2 daughters and now they've got a son. So obviously the couple absolutely delighted. A 10th great-grandchild for the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, which will be welcome news to him, won't it, now he's come back from hospital after that 4 weeks back.
It must be true if it was on Twitter. Nick, what are your listeners saying about Harry's job today?
Well, I just remind Holly, Phillip, I remind and your viewers, do you remember that television show, brilliant television satire called W1A with Hugh Bonneville that was set in the BBC? And when I read that Harry's job is Chief Impact Officer with Better Up, and he needs to work for collegiality and predisposition to work collaboratively with rapport and trust. I just expected this meeting to take place in the Frankie Howard room. That's what I was thinking when I saw that. But I wish him well. Look, we complain that he's not a working prince. He's become a working prince. Good luck to him. If it makes him happy, just good. I mean, it's not the sort of job I would take on, Phillip. And I have to say, I'm damn certain it's not the sort of job I would get either. So let's leave that there.
Let's finish on this one, because this is a swan that's been plaguing a residential street by banging on the doors and rattling letterboxes for up to 3 hours at a time. They're calling it ASBO Swan. It's Cedric.
I mean, how annoying that it's learnt to do that.
Yes, he's in Northampton. And
Yes.
he appears to be trying to get the attention of the occupants of the house, maybe expecting a treat.
Well,
He's been targeting the houses for 5 years.
We could have a rather thorny one. Sorry to speak over you, but Camilla will be aware of this. We could have a rather thorny one here, guys, because the ultimate owner of all swans is Her Majesty the Queen.
of course.
So we could actually have to serve an ASBO on the Queen, which will be heard in one of her own courts as she prosecutes herself because the Cedric action needs to be taken, or we might see the Queen, and she's got enough troubles up in court.
Camilla?
Also, aren't all swans meant to have ASBOs anyway? Because whenever I was a child and saw a swan, somebody nearby would say, that could break your arm.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing how many... my nan used to say that to me. Don't go near it, it'll break your arm.
Break your arm, break your arm. Has anyone ever had their arm broken by a swan? Do get in touch and tell us.
This is
now
just
that-
put around, this is
that
put
is
around
very
by
sensible.
swans, so they're left alone. They have spread this rumour,
They've done
clearly.
it
That's
themselves.
what it is.
Let's-
Fake news, fake news.
They started it.
Urban. It's
Naughty
an urban
swans.
rumour. What we've got to do, though, is we have to ask you now, please get in touch with us if a swan has ever broken your arm.
Yeah, we'd like to know.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, both of you.